Hi, everybody, and we're live. So welcome to Healing the Inner Child panel. Today, we're here with some amazing panelists who are here to share their story and their passion as well. We're from Sacred Community, of course, as well. And my name is Linda Grundy Barrett. I'm a hypnotherapist, transpersonal life coach. And I'm going to go around and get everybody just to introduce themselves as well. And just they'd like to say a little bit about what you do as well. That'd be wonderful. We'll start with Xavier.
Thanks for having me, Linda. My name is Xavier King. I am a transpersonal clinical hypnotherapist as well. I'm also a psychic, a Reiki master teacher, and a psychotherapist. And I'm originally from North Carolina, but I've been living in Australia for the last 6 years. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Xavier. Wonderful. And Chris.
Hi there. Good evening. I'm Chris Papias, and I am a mindset coach, and I help women who are stuck in the life of people pleasing and overwhelm and stress. And I help them take their big dream and convert it to a big goal and make it happen so that they can just tap into their strength and wisdom and create the life that they really want.
Thank you, Chris, and we are so grateful to have you here all the way from Canada as well. Very much appreciated and really value your input and your time. And Kim, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here. My name's Kim. I am a relationship counsellor, and I've been doing that now for 20 years. And my main thing is to help to understand why we are who we are, what makes us click. So starting right back from childhood to now, and why we are today. Anyway, more into that as we go along, I suppose. But thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. So let's kick things off by just discussing, for anyone who is watching who may have suffered trauma as a child, what's a tip that might help them get past their residual childhood issues that they may have carried from trauma? Who would like to start? Xavier?
The first thing that comes up for me when you ask that question, Linda, is, to really validate and acknowledge their feelings around where they're at right now. Especially like in the line of work that I do, often we're not really focusing on how we got there so much, but like how would we like to feel versus how we're feeling now, and everything that makes up those feelings in the current present moment of life. And then I do a lot of reparenting work. So if I think about combining those things together, one tip would be really just acknowledging and validating how you feel and to be gentle with yourself. And I know that's harder said than done, but just finding the smallest moments and maybe making them bigger for validating self and being gentle.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you, Xavier. That's really, really important, isn't it, to be gentle with ourselves, because everybody's got a story and we don't know what other people's stories are. So also being gentle with each other is very important as well. So Chris, tell us a little bit about your understanding of childhood trauma and how you help people.
Well, I think childhood trauma is not hard to describe. It's basically being violated emotionally, physically, mentally. And it took me decades to actually acknowledge that what I experienced was trauma. I came from a very good family. One of my parents played on the world stage, and it was always living in this individual's shadow, that this person, was my relation, and everything was measured against that standard. And so, of course, my good family could not have had abuse, right? That couldn't be. And it was a long time. It was well into my late 40s, early 50s, before I could actually look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, that's your story. That really did happen and it wasn't okay. And embrace that. And that it does not define who I am. It is something that happened to me. It is something that was done to me. It does not define who I am.
And do you mind if I ask, have you done work healing your inner child that is due to that as well?
Oh, yes. A lot of different avenues, a lot of different modalities. What really made my difference in my case was I had a near-death experience. I was a police officer. I had a near-death experience. And it was in that moment that I saw my life for what it was and connected with the pain. And vowed to myself that if I survived this event as it was unfolding, that I was going to make changes. And the first thing obviously I survived. And for me, the first thing I did was I took my biggest lifelong dream that I'd been saying no to for decades, and I did it. And that was to head over to Tanzania and hike to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And realizing that dream made me see the world and myself differently. And that's what started the journey of healing.
Well done. That's an amazing story. Absolutely amazing. So by challenging your boundaries or the old story, I suppose, that you knew, you were able to break through and really acknowledge your worth.
It was pattern interrupt. It was still a long journey because I was, the curse of asking for help is a sign of weakness. I had it. So I had to go on this journey on my own. Eventually I realized, it took years for me to realize that that's not how you do it, that's not really the most beneficial way of doing it. So my journey was very long, but definitely the pattern interrupt was the events that happened in my life in 2003. And my message is, you have a choice. You can either choose to wait until your back is against the wall, or you can choose to do it on your own time. And I think it's a lot easier to do it on your own time.
Thank you for that, Chris. That's really lovely. I wanted to ask you, Kim, with your work that you do as a relationship counsellor, how have you seen the impact of, people who are struggling with their inner child and, residual trauma affect relationships in general?
I think it's, from a counselling point of view, I think it's a major part of the problems that happen in relationship. See, I noticed that Xavier mentioned that the concentration for the way he does his work is on the present. And mine is to understand where it came from. Let me see if I can explain that. When someone presents in counselling, the reason that they present, or their problem that they're actually presenting with, is usually, not usually, but in most times, is caused by the presenting problem is actually a solution that they've taken on earlier in their life in childhood that's carried through, and in some way it protected them as a child, but now as an adult it no longer serves them. So a lot of the work that I do is in wanting to help them to see how this problem that they're holding on to is actually serving them in some way, because they present it as a problem, but it's actually serving them. So the work that I do is to take them back to their childhood, to the original event, if possible, using the emotions. And once they understand why they're holding on to it, they're then able to let go of it. And usually in relationship, to answer your question, you've got two people coming in, both with their own issues. He's coming in wanting you to solve her. She's coming in wanting you to solve him. neither of them are really there for themselves. So it becomes this wonderful balancing act of working with people and staying on both sides at the same time. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
absolutely. Absolutely. And I can agree, working with people who are struggling with addiction, depression, all sorts of things like that, often have developed strategies very early on in their childhood to manage trauma or manage things that they can't deal with. And those strategies, and also they stop maturing at a certain point as well sometimes, so they're repressing their natural development. So I agree, it's so important to go back, take them back to be able to identify that time when they created a strategy around, or a behavior around, dealing with the trauma, and use sort of not even consciously being aware of that, carrying that through their life, and that's part of the work I think that you're talking about as well. What techniques do you use, Kim, to get to understand, taking the clients back? Is it cognitive therapy or?
There's a model called depth-orientated brief therapy, and the basis of it is to take the presenting problem and actually solve it for them there in the room. And as much as you can solve the problem and get them experiencing what it would be like without it, in the process of doing that, what actually happens is a fear comes up, an emotional fear arises. And by taking that fear back and letting them, allowing to arise whatever images from childhood come up, usually brings up the original event. And then by delving into it, would you like an example?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I've got permission to talk about this one, but this particular person was a physiotherapist, and a brilliant physiotherapist, was required by many people to present the way that she does stuff because she does it differently and she has great success. The problem for her, though, was standing up in front of any crowd, she would become absolutely terrified. So the whole reason for coming to see me was, why am I terrified to stand up in front of people? One or two I'm fine, but put me in front of half a dozen and I'm lost. By actually taking her back to the original event that caused the issue, of why this problem is actually a solution that the child took on, it turned out that in a family picnic where there was a whole group of family people together, family, friends, a whole lot, she was only a young girl, about 4 or 5 years old, and she went off playing and someone spoke to her and she came running back to the family or the group and said, that person spoke to me. Now, she'd been taught not to speak to strangers, so she came back and reported it. The thing is, all of the family and the friends laughed because they thought it was so cute. But she took it on that by speaking up, they're laughing at her. So in that moment, she took on a way of protecting herself to make a promise, whatever it is, to never ever again speak up in front of crowds. Now that worked for her as a child to keep her safe, but as she became an adult and forgot the original event, that's why it became the presenting problem. End result was, once she understood that it was the child's problem, not hers, she was able to let go of it and move on and do some wonderful stuff. But that's what I mean by the original, the presenting problem is usually a positive for the person. And initially, back in childhood.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. I wanted to ask Xavier, we hear a lot about reparenting the inner child. Could you explain to people who are watching perhaps what that actually means, and is that something that we should all be really looking at more?
So I feel like the easiest way to explain what reparenting is essentially building that foundation with self in order to show up as the adult that you needed when you were younger. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I do think it is very important for people to focus on. And I think that really everyone can use reparenting techniques, like regardless of whether or not you've had intense trauma or minimal trauma or none. I think that as children and as human beings, we all have needs that always don't get met, whether it's in one place or another. And so reparenting techniques can be a really beautiful way in order to supplement those needs. And so, we're showing up as that adult, and the way that we can do that is even in the smallest of ways, like creating physical comfort for the self, working through ways that make ourselves feel safe, whether that's emotionally or mentally, energetically, physically, setting up things that help to create environments for ourselves, or even like just knowing that you have a favorite blanket that when you feel like nervous or upset that you can wrap yourself up in, and that is a tool that you can use that just helps to recreate safety and embed that within the self and makes you self-reliant for those things. It can go even further and more in depth depending on how much you may need to reparent. So I feel like there are lots of things to be said and lots of different techniques that can be brought up around that. But in general, it's really about building that connection and foundation with self and showing up as the person that you need and needed when you were younger.
That's so important, I think, because there are no such thing as perfect family dynamics, perfect parents, everything's ideal. And I think when you grow up in situations that may be challenging, you think you're the only one often, and you have no idea because it's your normal until you get older and start to share stories with other people and realize that, wow, some people have had really, really tough times as children. And so doing the inner work's very important as an adult, isn't it? So it's like the cycle of life. I think that we all get to learn these things and do the work, and then it all starts again.
Yeah, and doing the work is really interesting because reparenting is just a small fraction of doing the work, and I feel like in our industry in particular, there's a lot of doing the work that gets thrown around, but always not always a bunch of explanations around what that really means and how that really works for you. And I think what's important is that we focus on what works for self, because what works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for me. So let's say that. And from personal experience, reparenting is actually something that I, didn't realize that I was doing until the terminology kind of came around. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That helps put that into like a category for me to be able to understand it more for my conscious mind.
And have you found any challenges, Xavier, with inner child work, dealing with any particular, clients, perhaps some cases that you haven't been able to really, figure out, or in general, you find that one way or another with your holistic approach, you're able to figure it out or help them figure it out, really, because that's what you're doing, isn't it?
I feel like the main time that maybe things don't work out for someone is because oftentimes as a hypnotherapist, when people view me as just that without looking at the rest of what I do, and even knowing the rest of what I do, and they know that I'm a hypnotherapist, I often end up or have ended up with clients who come to me thinking that I can fix them immediately without much effort or energy from them. And so what I have found is that when people like that show up, it is difficult to get much result because doing the work requires more than you just sitting in the chair in front of me for one session and I snap my fingers and then you just go and everything is wonderful. And not a lot of people have been that way, but I tend to find that those types of individuals aren't ready to really dive in and like, probably wouldn't be able to sit with a session with Kim or have a coaching session with Chris because they're not actually willing to look at themselves. They really just want, a quick fix and a temporary thing rather than a long-term sustainable outcome. So those types of, I find that quite difficult. And even those, I suppose if I look at those who have had the ability and the want to really look at themselves, sometimes in the midst of really looking at themselves, it can become too overwhelming. And perhaps they're not practicing, coping mechanisms, healthy ones that we have gone through, like setting boundaries with themselves or working on maybe breath work, or maybe I've assigned them a hypnosis and they're not actually utilizing it. And it's, our self-sabotager has a tendency to come in and really wreak havoc when we start to make really positive changes for ourselves. And if that person isn't in a place where they feel strong enough within their self-discipline to really rely on the healthy coping mechanisms that they're beginning to develop, they can take steps backwards. And I think, my advice around that is always that the whole be gentle with yourself. Like, it's a process. I'm not going to judge you for making or landing back a couple of steps and then having to take a couple of steps forward again. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I agree. And thank you for that really good answer. We are a work in progress, that's for sure. And we, if you don't know really much about how hypnosis works, you can tend to just think, oh, well, someone's going to fix me. But it's actually just really giving you, I suppose, a way to get inside your own subconscious mind and look at the answers, because they're all within ourselves. All of the answers are always within ourselves, that's for sure. So do you think forgiveness and acceptance of ourselves is the key, Chris?
I think forgiveness is one of the most empowering concepts we can embrace. Once I understood that forgiveness was really about me moving on without the emotional attachment to the memory, it doesn't mean that what was done was okay. It means you did the best you knew how. And I'm thinking of someone in particular. This individual did the best they knew how given their conditioning. Didn't mean it was okay, but in fact, when I accepted that, I could actually feel a lot of compassion for that individual, because I saw how much of life they missed, because they never were able to get beyond their view of the world and their coping strategies. And how sad was that? So I think forgiveness and compassion go together quite a bit.
Yes. I don't know, has anyone heard of the Hopper 101 way of doing things?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a similar sort of philosophy. A guy in Hawaii was responsible for Hopper 101 way of saying, thank you, I love you, forgive me, I'm sorry. And you just say that you say it to furniture, you say it to people, you say it to everything, and it's supposed to take you back to zero. So I guess it's just another way of practicing, not holding on energetically to anything that doesn't serve you, and addressing or acknowledging those things and releasing and forgiving, I guess.
I know.
Yes,
I'll just add that for me, it was, I wanted to do good in the world, but I was driven by my wounds. When I became a police officer, it's because I wanted to stand up to the bad guys, stand up to the people who were hurting others. That was really, in a nutshell, my motivation. But I was driven by the anger that I was still feeling towards the people who had hurt me. My wounds had not healed to scars. And with scars comes wisdom and compassion and
Mm.
forgiveness.
Mm.
And so too bad I couldn't have started my career from that perspective. It would have, I think, made the career a lot different.
Mm. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
But
Oh,
what
it
an
is.
amazing career though, and going into that career with such a open heart, and then going through the struggles later. I think you hear a lot of people say they have a dark night of the soul experience that changes their life and perhaps shifts their perspective. I wanted to ask you, Kim, do you have a dark night of the soul kind of, or something that happened to you that really shifted your perspective in your life?
Shifted my perspective in what way?
Well, in regard to understanding other people's pain, in perhaps in your healing modality or your career.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest personal lessons I ever found is that my parents were alcoholics, and I was given up at a young age and looked after my family. And I always saw my auntie and her world and her children, and always as the wicked witch of the north. I had immense anger and I would say hatred for the way that I was brought up. But then what happened, I was able to leave home when I was 16 and a day.
Oh,
We've just got a bit of an internet issue there with
yeah.
Kim. Hopefully he'll pop back on in a second. Okay, well, I don't know if you can hear us, Kim. I'm just going to chat for a second, and hopefully we can hear that rest of that story, because I really, really very important to hear what's happening after that. Okay, so I'll just mention my own little dark night of the soul story, I guess, while we're all sharing. And yes, the reason I am doing the work that reason I'm doing it, he'll pop back in, I'm sure. Like Xavier said, you wouldn't be able to really connect in and do what we do if you hadn't had your own experience in some way. And mine was childhood trauma. So I grew up in a household where my father was very physically violent, and he hated women, hated girls, and he used to physically abuse my mother and myself and the boys as well. But violence, not anything else. But so we escaped from there at a young age, but nothing was ever sort of talked about, or nobody said anything much in those days, and you just got on with it. And then I felt like I was in a bubble and I didn't really understand what was going on in the world. So I went on to work in a career where I was helping people, and it took a long time until I got into my late 40s until I actually started to really look at inner child healing and understand all of the things associated with that. And hypnosis is actually what really helped me. And I had a physical injury. I could no longer do dentistry, which is what I used to do. And so then I went into to this work. So I think that, but I'm still a work in progress, very much so. And I think that we just continue on that path in our life, and then you meet yourself back at a place where you think, oh, okay, I forgive you, I love you, I'm sorry for all of the things that we might have thought and done, and without really knowing why. So, and speaking to many clients, a lot have similar stories, but everybody wants the same thing. I think everybody just wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be seen and be themselves, and have confidence to really find their own path. So I think people in general are very brave, when they start on the process of doing their inner work, and takes them to all different places. And there are so many modalities of healing and help that people can get. So, Chris, tell me a little bit more about the type of. You mentioned you see women mostly women. Is it that you see?
Yes. Yes.
What would the average client be presenting to you with?
Successful and unhappy. And that's the hardest part, is when you have all the trappings of success. The good job, the nice, all of that. And everybody who's looking at you is going, wow, you've got it all. But on the inside, you feel like something is missing. And it's this nagging thing, and it's feeling overwhelmed with life. It's looking to the future and seeing nothing but more of the same. I mean, I remember that, like, I was the poster child for overachiever. Everything, I measured my personal value by my achievements, but being a perfectionist, nothing I did was ever good enough. So you just drive yourself. And a lot of the women that I work with are like that, intelligent, successful women, but something's just missing, and they don't even know the question to ask. I actually had a woman tell me once, I can't even imagine what it could be like to live life with joy. And this is someone who society would consider a very successful person. And it all comes back to, I believe, in my world anyway, of really connecting with your purpose. Who are you? What are the gifts that you have to share with the world? I believe that fulfillment comes from sharing our unique gifts with the world for the betterment of all. And that's the caveat, because there's people who are very successful and share their gifts, but it's not for the betterment of the world. So if that's what I believe is the key. So when I start working with someone, the first thing I do is, what do you want? Why do you want it? And the why is much more important than the what. And often when you get to the why, the what changes.
Yes, that's right. That's the question. Why? What is the purpose or intention of what you're doing?
What is your vision?
Yes.
What is the vision that you have of the life that you want? We're not taught to do that. We're taught to follow. We're taught to fit in. This is what the expectations are. And so many of us live our life according to expectations of others. Yes. And my clients are tired of doing that. They're just really tired, but they can't see a way out.
Yes. And then they come to beautiful Chris, and then by the end of seeing you, they have purpose.
They understand why. So a really good example of one of my clients, very successful, C-suite, major organization, and felt so trapped. Her dream was to go independent and start a consulting agency, but felt so trapped, felt that she owed the agency, her loyalty, kept hearing, every time she dreamt of her going off on her own, could hear her mother's voice, her telling her that she was nothing and would never amount to anything. And to just, I think, so what Kim was saying is, who's saying that? Like, where's the origin of that? And understanding that it was somebody's opinion. It's not truth. And what is the evidence that you are creative, resourceful, and whole, and able to go out and chase your dreams? And by the end of it, this client left the organization. She's never looked back. She's off doing her consulting, and life has changed. It's changed.
Amazing results. Welcome back, Kim.
Yes, unfortunately, my phone overheated and closed itself down.
Oh,
so I've now got it out of its case. I was going to put it in the refrigerator, but it would have been hard to connect. So if it drops out again, it'll be the same thing. So I'm sorry about it.
Oh, that's okay. We can't control these things, and it wouldn't be a discussion without a technical issue here or there. So thank you. So you were right before you dropped out, you were talking about a particular topic.
Yeah, I was answering a question in regards to, was it a traumatic moment or something that shifted my view,
Yes.
or a lesson that I learned. What happened was, when I left home, I really did leave home with a lot of anger and hatred for my childhood, my upbringing. And it wasn't until I actually started counselling many years later that I was able to sit down and, instead of looking at it through my memory, but to actually put myself in the shoes of my auntie and her children, or her as a mother and wife with 4 children, then taking on 2 more, myself and my brother. And I was able to recognize her age at the time, which would have been early 20s, taking this on.
Mm.
And so I stepped through the process of her having us in her world and the difficulties and everything that she went through. And in that moment, I lost all the anger and hatred that I had for her. I was able to really see it from her point of view. And I think that really started a lot of my process of wanting to understand why I think the way I think. And by being able to get back to, because here I've carried all of this anger for so many years, which was all just developed by in my own mind or things that I told myself. Yet in reasoning and being able to look at it from a different point of view, I was able to attach new meaning and in turn see the world differently. So that became a very precious gift for myself and my world and the work that I do. It's about understanding why I am me. So,
and again, that's a story of acceptance following understanding. And you're right, very precious, very precious. How old were you when you had that realization?
I was probably in my 30s at the time. So it was, I carried a lot of anger for a very long time. But it's the magic of it is that as you start to peel away all of these things that trigger you, and as you work through the process of that, life becomes far more gentle. Life becomes far more. It is a journey, and as Xavier was saying, there's a lot of people that are not engaged in the journey. They just want the instant result. Yet it's the journey of life we go on to understand that we do choose our own paths, and it's what we think that really creates us. It's never really what occurs, but it's what we think of what occurred, what meaning we attached. I'm just learning over time to really attach good meanings to things. It gives peace. It gives peace.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yes. So thank you for the comment from Sophia, tuning in from hospital. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Sophia. Yes, special shout out to our beautiful Sophia, who is recovering in hospital, and sending love. She's always here, of course, organising these panels, and she is very much missed, but I'm hoping she's enjoying the time out. And so Xavier, do you have anything to add regarding, what you've seen with regard to people having these, we were talking about the dark night of the soul experiences, but they're also there, because I know you know a lot about astrology as well, and it can relate to the Saturn return stuff and all that too, can't it, in the 30s?
Yeah.
Just wondering what you would like to comment on regarding that.
There's so much
big, throwing it out there, big area.
There's a lot to say around that. In general, though, I think what I'd like to speak to is about like emergence, really. I feel like what I see from people, I love that Kim recognized that in his 30s he was really angry and was working through his journey of life and being able to change his perspective on things. And I think it's important to note that, like, leading up to your 30s in general, like, it is literally your emergence story of like really discovering who you are. And in some cases people go as far as like figuring out the why and the how, and some people will analyze it so much that they'll figure out every little bit and like categorize their whole self and then like move forward, which astrology can be really helpful for that. It helps you figure out so much about yourself and like how and why you show up the way that you do in the world, and and how all of that was like predetermined in some way, shape, or form. So for me, in the work that I do, also like I deal a lot with spiritual emergence, which I feel like goes hand in hand with like personal emergence. It's because spirituality to me is your journey of self, and then reconnection to self. So I find that the younger someone is, the less likely that they are to necessarily understand the self fully, and to be open to in-depth things. Plus they're still developing, but then the older that you get, especially moving towards your 30s, you have a tendency to be able to understand things more. But what I also find in younger clientele is that they're more open to hearing and exploring things as well. It's really interesting. I feel like people in their 20s or not always feel like the people in the middle that are sometimes often feeling quite stagnant, which I think from personal experience and from working with people in that age bracket, I see a lot more stagnation and stubbornness and unwillingness to look at self. Yeah, the whole idea about the Saturn return is really interesting. Often when new clients come in, I have them fill out a form, and on their form I ask them stuff about their astrological presence, and some people know the answers, but then I'll be like, how old are you? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense, you're going through your Saturn return. And some people look at me like, what? And then other people are like, oh, that helps make that so much more tangible for them. I know that my Saturn return was incredibly and I'm very grateful for it, because that was my dark night of the soul, and I spent it in New Zealand barefoot, crying on mountainsides while I went hiking, because I had moved to the other side of the world and didn't know what I was doing. It was just hanging out in floodwaters and just figuring out who I was. And I felt like my environment at that time with the flooding and stuff just fit, because that's what my emotions were doing, and everything just so much sense.
The whole universe was in sync with your cathartic experience.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, wow. So so impactful. Thank you for that story, Xavier, too, and those comments, because so impactful, and your whole self is important, body, mind, and spirit. Absolutely, I agree. Because when we go through, whether we look at it from the astrological point of view, or I do tarot, we have the major arcana, which work their way through the birth, death, rebirth, and into the spiritual understanding, and understanding that it's not even about us anymore. We lose the sense of ego, all that sort of stuff. That's all part of to bring it back into healing the inner child. I guess it's all part of there's many opportunities on our journey to go back and heal the inner child. So that's another thing I think that we need to understand too, is all of a sudden we don't have to wake up one day and go, oh, that's what's been going on with me. I think I'll go and heal the inner child tomorrow, and Saturday I'll go and do something. I'll kick that one off because we get to have many times that we can address in our cycles or seasons of growth and expansion and contraction, don't we? So and I think every time we go back and we learn a lesson and go back and revisit it, we add another rich layer of understanding to our lessons and ourselves. So I agree, absolutely, the spiritual aspect, it's all got to tie together, body, mind, and spirit, I think, to really be completely integrated. And I guess that's our journey, I feel, as well. Chris, any comments on the body, mind, spirit concept with regard to the healing? And
I came from a very religious background, and the religion that I was exposed to was quite intolerant and quite violent. And I turned my back on religion, and spirituality had no place because I couldn't distinguish between the two. And then I discovered Gary Zukav, and his book, The Seat of the Soul, was something that I read, and I was able to realize the difference between spirituality and religion, and I could embrace the concept of spirituality again. For me, you can't, that is, when you talk about purpose, when you talk about values, when you talk about that, to me is spirituality. And until I could embrace the concept, I couldn't live it. If that makes sense. It was a dimension that I couldn't relate to. So I didn't waste time, looking for purpose. And yet at the same time, I longed for finding a place in the world where I could make a difference. So I found that really interesting. But I think mind, body, spirit, it's all, you can't ignore one and show up in the world as your best self.
Mm.
To me, that's not possible from my experience.
Agreed. Any thoughts, Kim?
Yeah, just like what Chris was saying there about growing up in a religious family, so-called religious family, and then trying to, just like Chris, could not connect spirituality and religion. And to finally one day come to the realization that religion is external.
Yes.
Whereas for me, I find that spirituality is internal. And it's in that depth of growth of self that I've really found my spiritual side. And I've found the beauty within me. But it's got nothing to do with organized religion at all for me. I know there's a lot of people find great benefits in religion, and it saves and protects many people. But for me, my spirituality is who I be in life, where I walk, how I walk, how I be with people. And that touches a place. I love the concept of spirituality, and the symbols and all the parts of it, the stillness, the meditation, the quietness, the gift of sharing energy. It's very beautiful, very beautiful. Mind, body, well, as you can see, my body is probably not as looked after as it could be, but
Thank you, Kim. That's a really beautiful explanation of how that's affected you. And we've lost Kim, I think.
Yeah.
Internet's really playing up today. It is, I think you can't talk about healing on any level without actually acknowledging that. I think that's really important, that our conversation sort of went to, that aspect or those embodying all of those aspects together. And we all have, different times that we've learnt different tools, and, we're sort of integrating them as we learn. So I'd like, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. That was beautiful. Good to see you
back again. Amazing.
back again. So my little mini religion/spirituality story was that I grew up in an atheist household, and so I had no concept of, it's just black and white, there's rules and da-da-da-da-da. So my form of rebellion in my teenage years was to join a Pentecostal church and get engaged to the preacher's son. And And then this all happened within a period of a couple of weeks. And then right before the big nuptials was supposed to happen, everyone was, you know, and no disrespect to that religion, you know, it was there were lovely elements of it, but it wasn't for me. I realised at the last minute, oh, I don't think this is really what I was after either. I was looking for something, searching for something, and so I kind of ran away. They found me at work and they chased me with their tambourines one day, but that was another story. But that was the start of my, you know, searching out something spiritual and something else. But then working in a science-based career for ages, where you have to have randomised control trials to, or it doesn't exist, it's not true. I grappled again because I had the other side of me, which was learning about tarot and metaphysical stuff. And then this side where I was embarrassed to actually say anything about what I was experiencing in the spiritual side of things. So that's all come together and integrated now, but it took a long time for that integration to happen as well. I was always worried what people would think and, you know, stuff like that. So it's interesting, the journeys and the pathways to get to where we understand what our body and mind and soul really needs. And like you were mentioning, Kim, I certainly wasn't as kind, well, you didn't say that, but I could have looked after my body better in the earlier days as well. And, you know, you don't know these things when you're younger, I suppose, but yeah. but it's all part of the healing, and healing the inner child is all part of that as well. And it's been an absolutely amazing conversation, and I really, really loved hearing from everybody, and everybody's comments were very valuable. And I hope that people watching at home also got something from everything as well that everybody has said. And so I wanted to give everybody, just before we go, an opportunity to tell us about how we can find you, and if you have anything to offer, anything happening with to do with your business that you'd like people to know about. So Chris?
Go to somebody else. I didn't plan this well.
Oh,
I did not plan this well.
No problem at all. You please, I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No. It's here. Okay. I just didn't plan it.
Xavier?
Yeah, so you can find me, I think my website's listed underneath the comments, but you can find me at teamuniverse.com.au. And I actually have a little ebook on Amazon called Reuniting with Your Inner Child. So if you're interested in maybe having some more tips and tricks about how to like reignite that relationship with self, you can find that there. And yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting with each of you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Xavier. And of course, those details will be in the comments below. Kim, did you have anything that you would like to mention coming up with Sacred Community?
No. How's that? I tend to leave a lot of that to Sophia and just stay in the background.
Well, that's okay. Or anything regarding
well, there's the launch coming up. There's the launch coming up in a couple of months, which is very exciting. But I do suggest if you want to connect any more with the Sacred Society, sacredyou.love, that's the website, sacredyou.love. But I'd like to really thank you, Linda, for, this is your first hosting event, and you've done very well. So congratulations, and it's been lovely to meet both Chris and Xavier and to share the communication with the three of you. I've actually enjoyed this whole process, so thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much, Kim. It has been lovely. It's been a beautiful energy amongst us all, so appreciate that. Thank you, Kim. So Chris, is there anything that you want to?
Yes, thank you. I have a guide that I've written about how to pivot from overachiever to high performer, and it outlines the 3 steps that I use with my clients: the vision, beliefs, and action. And I can give you the link that you can add to the comments, I believe.
Yes, we'll pop it down in the comments.
I'll give that to you. I'll stay on the call. But yes, and it also tells people how they can get a hold of me if they want to continue the conversation. I'm more than happy to meet with anybody who wants any kind of clarification or just chat about what it's like to live stressed out high achiever.
Absolutely delightful to hear from you. You're such a lovely speaker and you have a beautiful story to tell. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so grateful for you joining us from all the way from Canada. We'll be able to let you go to bed shortly, or at least put your feet up and have a cuppa.
It was a cheap ticket to fly to Australia. It's very easy to get there. But I thank you for the opportunity for the conversation. I love hearing other people's perspectives. We all have something to contribute, and we're all making the world a better place.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for. And so I just wanted to mention that at the moment, if anyone's interested in joining the sacred community, you can join for $1. And for $1, you can have a look at all the different tribes. So within the community, there are lots of people. I'm a tribe host. Xavier is a tribe host. Xavier, can you tell us a little bit about your tribe that you started?
Yeah, so my tribe is called Spirituality Adventures for the Gender Diverse. So and I'm going to run a different one soon, but this one in particular is for individuals who identify as gender fluid or transgender or agender or androgynous, anything along the gender perspective, and who are interested in exploring their spirituality more and having a really safe space to do that in. So that happens every Sunday at 10 a.m. Australian time.
That is amazing, because we do not have these platforms available that I'm aware of, and so grateful to have you in the community and offering that tribe. So yes, brilliant. Thank you, Xavier. So my tribe is Healing with Hypnosis and Tarot, and my tribe meetings are held once a month. And so we spend a bit of time doing work with both tarot and a little bit of hypnosis as well, but I find that they marry very well together, because tarot are great tools for us to understand things that are going on within our own mind, and then the hypnosis is really helpful in addressing or working with, figuring those things out. So, and I've been a tribe member and a tribe host, community member, for 2 years now. And it's been most amazing experience in connecting with other people. So highly recommended if anyone's interested. It's a great time to join. So regarding my own promotions, I have a course, Tarot, Learn to Read Tarot or Tarot for Beginners course, which is available now. If anyone is likes to play with tarot but would like a more foundational understanding of what tarot cards are and what they mean. And what else we've got coming up? Oh, I think we have another panel coming up on Friday night, Living Your Best Life with Metaphysics, which I'm on the panel. If anyone wants to join us, please feel free. That's coming up this week, Friday at 7 p.m. But there's always amazing, really interesting panelists, and discussions going on all the time within the community. So I think that's all for now. Fabulous. Anyone, any last comments? No? Brilliant. All right. So that's it for us today. Hope everybody has a blessed, beautiful week, and we will see each other again soon. Bye.
Good night.